We now come to the spring forecast. I call the Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Mr. Speaker, this government has the right economic plan for our country. A plan that is...
Order. Sorry. Look, both sides, if you're not interested, please, you don't have to stay in the chamber. I'm interested, my constituents are interested, and your constituents as well. Chancellor.
A plan that is even more important in a world that in the last few days has become yet more uncertain. With unfolding conflict in Iran and the Middle East, it is incumbent on me and on this government to chart a course through that uncertainty, to secure our economy against shocks and protect families from the turbulence that we see beyond our borders. I want to express my gratitude to members of our armed forces as they serve across the globe to protect our country. And I want to reassure this House that I am in regular contact with the Governor of the Bank of England, with my international counterparts and with key affected industries, including our maritime sector. And tomorrow I will meet with our North Sea industry leaders to discuss the implications that they face and work with them to manage this uncertain period. Mr. Speaker, in an increasingly dangerous world, I am proud to be the Chancellor that is delivering the biggest uplift in defence spending since the Cold War. With £650 million committed in January to upgrade our Typhoon fighter jets, a new Royal Navy frigate launched from Rosyth last week, and just yesterday, our £1 billion helicopter deal with Leonardo. I am in no doubt about Britain's ability to navigate the challenges we face. The plan that I have been driving forward since the election is the right one. Stability in our public finances, investment in our infrastructure, including our armed forces, and reform to Britain's economy. It is a plan to reshape our economy and break with the failed ideas of the past. Building growth are not just the contribution of a few people in a few places, but in every part of Britain, with a state that doesn't stand back, but that steps up, strengthening our trading relationships and our alliances, creating capacity in our economy through affordable housing, better transport and free childcare. An active and a strategic state, building growth and economic security in an uncertain world. Stability is the single most important precondition for economic growth. That is why we have committed to a single major fiscal event a year, limiting major policy changes to the budget and giving businesses and households the certainty that they need. Today, the new forecasts from the Office of Budget Responsibility show that our plan is the right one. Inflation is down. Borrowing is down. Living standards are up and the economy is growing. Mr. Speaker, this government has restored economic stability. The previous government allowed inflation to skyrocket to over 11%. They stoked interest rates to 15-year highs and delivered the first parliament on record where people were poorer at the end than they were at the start of the parliament. That is their record.
Well before the pandemic.
I recognise the impact that what the Conservatives did had on families. We promised change at the election, and I understand the responsibility on me to deliver that change. I know that the question that people will ask themselves at the next election is this: are me and my family better off? I am determined that the answer will be yes. The promise that we changed the change that we promised has already started. There have been 6 cuts in interest rates since the general election, the fastest pace in reduction in 17 years. And inflation has fallen. For businesses, that means lower capital costs and greater uncertainty. And for families, it means more money in their pockets to spend in local shops and on the high streets. Those interest rate cuts will save households over £1,300 per year on a typical new fixed-rate mortgage. And real wages have risen by more in the first 18 months of this Labour government than they did in the first 10 years of the Tory government. At the budget, I went further to deliver the change that people rightly demand. I extended the 5p cut in fuel duty for a further 5 months. I froze prescription charges for the 2nd year in a row. I froze rail fares for the first time in 30 years. And I am taking £150 off of energy bills from next month. In February, the Bank of England confirmed that inflation will fall faster because of the action that I took in the budget. And today, the Office for Budget Responsibility expects inflation to come down even faster than it forecast in the autumn. Mr. Speaker, in the current global context, with the risk that rising energy prices will put upward pressure on inflation, the action that I have taken is even more crucial. Keeping inflation low and stable is the best way to support family incomes and reduce pressures on the cost of living. But that's not all we've done. This Labour government has funded 30 hours of free childcare for working families. We are rolling out free breakfast clubs at primary schools. And we are set to achieve the biggest reduction in child poverty over a parliament since records began by reversing the shameful 2-child limit imposed by the party opposite. That is the moral choice for the children who will no longer go to school hungry, and for the women who will no longer have to suffer the grotesque indignity of the rape clause. And scrapping the 2-child limit is an enduring investment in our children and in our future, to realise the potential of young people whose otherwise potential would be wasted. The Tories have said that they would reinstate that destructive policy. And now Reform are saying exactly the same thing. 2 parties united in their intention to plunge nearly 500,000 children back into poverty at a single stroke. Mr. Speaker, if you import failed Tory politicians, you get failed Tory policies too. Labour and only Labour have the right economic plan for our country. Last year, we demonstrated the resilience of Britain's economy in the face of global headwinds, with the fastest growth of any G7 country in Europe. Today, the Office for Budget Responsibility has updated its growth forecasts, including reflecting lower net migration. Average growth across the forecast period is largely unchanged, while the OBR has adjusted the profile of GDP so that it grows slightly slower in 2026 and then faster in both 2027 and 2028. So GDP is forecast to grow by 1.1% in 2026, 1.6% in both 2027 and 2028, and 1.5% in both 2029 and 2030. I've always said that growth is for a purpose, to make working people better off. And I can confirm that GDP per person is set to grow more than was expected in the autumn, with growth of 5.6% over the course of this Parliament. That compares to a fall in GDP per capita in the last Parliament. And by the next election, after accounting for inflation, people are forecast to be £1,000 better off per year. Oh, I didn't hear them that time. We promised change, Mr. Speaker, and we are delivering that change. The economy is growing, living standards are rising, and inflation has fallen. But I'm not satisfied yet with these forecasts. I know that the economy is not yet working for everyone, and that the deep economic scars left by the party opposite and their mates in reform are still blighting the lives of too many people. In today's forecasts, unemployment is set to peak later this year and then fall in every year of the forecast period, ending the forecast period at 4.1%, lower than it was at the start of the Parliament. But young people in particular are still suffering from the aftermath of years of Tory mismanagement. In the last 5 years of the previous government, the number of young people not in education, employment or training increased by 113,000. The number of inactive people reached record highs under their government. And over the last decade, apprenticeship starts by young people fell by 40%. This government will not leave an entire generation of young people behind. We are already taking action with additional investment to reform apprenticeships to prioritise young people. And through the £820 million Youth Guarantee, providing young people with employment support and a guaranteed job. And in the coming weeks, I will set out more reforms to undo the Tory legacy of neglect and give young people the support and the opportunity that they deserve. Mr. Speaker, in the face of global uncertainty, we beat the forecasts last year. In the year ahead, the choices that we are making gives me confidence that we will beat them again. And in the year ahead, more of the choices that we have already made will come into effect. Discounts on business energy costs, trade deals with India, the US and the EU, reforms to back our entrepreneurs, investment in our infrastructure, skills funding for further education and more planning reforms. Progress opposed by the Conservatives, opposed by Reform, opposed by the Liberal Democrats and opposed by the Green Party too. Because it is Labour and only Labour that has the right plan for our country. Our plan for growth is grounded in a profound rejection of the failed economic dogmas of the past. The trickle-down, trickle-out thinking that produced ever-diminishing returns for working people. I know that an economy cannot be working if it is delivering for only a few people in a few places. I know that it matters where things are made and who makes them. And I believe that the working people who keep our country moving deserve a fair day's pay for an honest day's work. Since the election, I've been making the big choices that will bring about the deep structural changes that our economy needs so that it works again for working people. The choices to take on vested interests and back the builders, not the blockers. The choice to increase public investment and protect our public finances with new fiscal rules. And the choice to give people in all parts of our country the opportunities that they deserve. By reforming the Treasury spending rules in the Green Book to unlock investment in all of our urban, rural and coastal communities. Mr. Speaker, those are the right choices for our country, for security, for stability and growth. Today's forecasts from the Office of Budget Responsibility show that they are starting to pay off. And I am clear-eyed about where the opportunities for the British economy lie in this Parliament and beyond. In my second May's lecture in 2 weeks' time, I will set out 3 major choices that will determine the course of our economy into the future. To go further in strengthening our global relationships, breaking down trade barriers and deepening alliances with our European partners for a more secured and connected economy. To go further in backing innovation and harnessing the power of AI, so that entrepreneurs and innovators thrive here in Britain and so that working people reap the rewards. And to go further in transforming our economic geography, so that we can build growth on a broad and stable basis, spreading opportunity and unlocking opportunity in every part of Britain. Mr. Speaker, I came into politics because I believed in a government that stands up for working people. That everyone, no matter where they grow up, deserves security and a fair chance to achieve their potential. And that being able to manage the bills, afford a home and pay for a holiday is never too much to ask. When governments lose control of the economy, as the Tories did, it is working people who pay the price in their pay packets, in their bills and in their mortgages. That's what the party opposite inflicted on working people over 14 years. Austerity that cut off investment, Brexit, which cut us off from our closest trading partners, and Liz Truss's disastrous mini-budget, cheered on by the Leader of the Opposition and by the Honourable Member for Clacton. Oh, he's not here today.
No, never here.
Mr. Speaker, 5 Prime Ministers, 7 Chancellors, 11 plans for growth, and at the end of it all, the only Parliament on record where living standards were worse at the end than they were at the start. And a £22 billion black hole in the public finances. That is their legacy. And make no mistake, the Tory Tribute Act up there, they would do exactly the same thing. They may have changed the colour of their rosettes, but the British people won't forget that they are the exact same people who wrecked our public services and wrecked our public finances in the Tory government. The same people, the same policies and the same disastrous outcomes for working people. The Tories left our country, our people and our allies exposed. They had no plan and no intention to fund their pledge to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence. And reform would go one step further by ditching our allies and siding with Russia. While the Green Party want to take us out of NATO and jeopardise our alliances. Well, she shakes her head. I don't know if they've changed their policy, but their policy is to take us out of NATO. So let me be clear. It is Labour and only Labour that can provide social justice, national security and fiscal responsibility. In their forecasts today, the Office for Budget Responsibility show that we are set to reduce borrowing by nearly £18 billion compared to the autumn. This year, we are set to borrow less than the G7 average, something that the Tories never achieved in any year in 14 years. The forecast today shows that public sector net borrowing is set to fall from 4.3% this year to 3.6% next year, then to 2.9%, 2.5% and to 1.8% in 2029-30. And even after funding other measures announced since the budget, including the new special educational needs system set out by my right honourable friend, the Education Secretary, last week. Headroom against the stability rule in 2029-30 has increased from £21.7 billion to £23.6 billion, with headroom against the investment rule also higher at £27.1 billion. And debt is now set to be lower in every year of the forecast compared with the autumn. Mr. Speaker, it is because of the choices I have made to keep our public finances stable and restore our credibility that we can invest in the priorities of working people. Investment in our communities with pride in place. Investment in our schools to fix crumbling classrooms and give every child the education that they deserve. And investment in our NHS to bring waiting lists down and with a record cash settlement. I have never accepted that we have to choose between social justice and fiscal responsibility. Because there is nothing progressive, nothing Labour, about spending £100 billion a year. That's £1 in £10 of what government spends, just paying on the interest of the debt racked up by the party opposite. After their disastrous mini-budget, our debt interest rate soared towards the highest in the G7. And from my budget to this forecast, while average yields rose for the rest of the G7, yields on UK government debt fell. The Tories squandered Britain's credibility. My plan is rebuilding it. Already, because of the action that I have taken, we are expected to spend nearly £4 billion less on debt interest next year than was forecast in the autumn. And if we stay the course and stick to our plan, and our debt interests return to the G7 average, where they were before they wrecked things with Liz Truss's mini-budget, we will have £15 billion a year more for the priorities of working people and to make working people better off. That is the prize on offer. That is the prize within our grasp. This is the right plan. A plan that is more necessary than ever before in the world of uncertainty. A stronger and more secure economy. Inflation and interest rates falling. Resilient public finances. And in every part of Britain, working people better off. Mr. Speaker, every additional patient treated in an NHS hospital, every child lifted out of poverty, every breakfast club in every school is because of the choices that we have taken. And because I have the right plan for our country. But let this House be in no doubt. Every pound that we have invested, every pound in the pockets of working people, every pound that we have secured in this forecast today can be wiped out by a change of course. So we must reject a return to austerity, to protect our public services and invest in Britain's future. We must reject the temptation of easy answers and reckless borrowing, to protect family finances and get the cost of living down. And we must reject the political instability which would put at risk all the progress that we have made. My plan is the right one. I am in no doubt about how great the rewards can be if we stay the course. The forecasts today confirm that the choices this government have made are the right ones. Stability in our public finances, interest rates and inflation falling, living standards rising, more children lifted out of poverty, more appointments in our NHS, more investment in our infrastructure, a growing economy and more money in the pockets of working people. Mr. Speaker, these are the right choices, this is the right plan, and I commend this statement to the House.
Shadow Chancellor Belstride.
Mr. Speaker, is that it? What utter complacency. A Chancellor in denial. She speaks of stability. What planet is the Right Honourable Lady on? She has lurched from putting up taxes to destroying growth, to destroying headroom, to coming back to putting up more taxes, more growth destroyed. Round and round we go, like a fiscal twister ripping up everything in its path. And Mr. Speaker,
Sorry. I will hear the Shadow Chancellor, because people need to recognise there's two sides. Let's hear the other side now.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. They just don't like the truth, Mr. Speaker. That's the truth of it. As our economy bleeds out, what does the Right Honourable Lady do? She comes to this House with nothing to say and with no plan. Unless, of course, doing nothing is a cunning plan to avoid those U-turns further down the line. She is weak, Mr. Speaker. She has even stripped the OBR of its ability to assess whether she is meeting her fiscal targets. So, Mr. Speaker, let it be remembered that at this time in this chamber, this weak and chaotic government gave up on the British people. She has nothing to say to us today. This is not a spring statement. This is not a spring statement, Mr. Speaker. It is...
Order. Mr. Gardner, I expect better. We have to listen to you on a Thursday night. I don't need to hear you. No, Belstride.
No, they don't like it, Mr. Speaker. They don't like the truth. This is not a spring statement, Mr. Speaker. It is a surrender statement. Yes. The Chancellor... The Chancellor has the temerity to suggest that she is creating the conditions for renewed growth. She is rather like the dodgy estate agent standing in the crumbling building with the roof gone, the windows gone, with the floor gone, and saying, just think of the potential. But that potential, Mr. Speaker, has been undermined by the terrible state of our public finances. When it comes to the deficit, she knows, the Right Honourable Lady knows, when it comes to borrowing, that borrowing this year is almost double that which was forecast at the time of the general election. She knows that the forecasts are predicated on the numbers she has given to the OBR that they have to accept, including squeezing spending at the end of the Parliament, raising taxes, raising energy bills at the same time. We know, Mr. Speaker, we know that that is unrealistic. And the reason that we know it, Mr. Speaker, is that she and the Prime Minister have no backbone when it comes to taking difficult decisions. Before the budget, Mr. Speaker, winter fuel payment, U-turn. Welfare reform, U-turn. Two-child benefit cap, U-turn. And in the short period of time after the budget, Mr. Speaker, farm tax, U-turn. Family business tax, U-turn. Public houses, U-turn. And on the deficit, when she rises again, could she tell the House how she's going to fill that black hole of £6 billion around this end budget? And she mentions, quite rightly, the Iran war and the greater threats that our country faces. Could she explain in a moment how she is going to fund what we have been urging her to do, to go to 3% of GDP on defence by the end of this Parliament? How will she fund that?
Order. Seriously, we need to hear this. If you don't... I can help you if you don't want to.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. She mentions the cost of borrowing and says it is coming down. Does she not know that the cost of borrowing in this country has been the highest in the G7, higher even...
Somebody needs to switch the phone off. It is not acceptable.
Even higher than Greece. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, if debt were a government department, it would be the third largest spending department in Whitehall. Not money going on the people's priorities, but simply being flushed down the drain. She makes great store of the latest forecasts on debt, saying that it is coming down compared to the forecast back in the autumn. But if you strip away her dodgy definition of debt, it will be going up in just about every year of that forecast. Yet, Mr. Speaker, she has the audacity to praise her own performance. She points to growth, but does she not know that the Bank of England only last month downgraded growth for both this year and next year? She specifically, a moment ago, said that this government had beaten the forecast for growth from last year. The forecast at the beginning of last year was for 2% growth. The growth outcome at the end of last year was 1.3%, Mr. Speaker. By my mathematics, that is not an improvement. It should be a considerable concern to the entire House that the Right Honourable Lady clearly thinks that it is. She points to interest rates coming down, but does she not know that her ruinously inflationary policies have seen interest rates higher for longer, meaning more expensive mortgages for hundreds of thousands of people across our country. And unemployment, well, Mr. Speaker, she was slightly coy about unemployment because, of course, what we know is it now stands at a 5-year high. And under every single Labour government in history, unemployment has risen. And this government is no exception. On tax, the Right Honourable Lady is fond of saying that she is simply asking people to pay a little more tax. Well, I don't remember, Mr. Speaker, the taxman phoning me up and asking me if I'd awfully mind paying a little more tax. And what does it mean? What does it mean? It means workers struggling. It means employers laying off staff. It means tens of thousands of the most talented people in our country going to other places where they believe the opportunities are greater. That's what a little more tax means, Mr. Speaker. And what has that tax done? It has destroyed, damaged deeply entire sectors of our economy. Hospitality, almost 100,000 job losses since this government came to office, particularly impacting our youngest people. Youth unemployment, the highest in Europe, the first time for a quarter of a century. Young people, their dreams, their aspirations, their hopes, all those bright young faces smashed on the altar of her incompetence. What is her message to young people today? Her message today has been that her so-called plan is working. But what is the reality? Inflation up, borrowing up, spending up, tax up, welfare up, unemployment up. All of this, Mr. Speaker, speaks to the weakness and chaos of this government. Is it any wonder that her so-called plan is not working? We have amongst the highest energy costs in the world, and yet she doubles down on net zero. And given where we are, the first thing that the Right Honourable Lady should do is get rid of those taxes on North Sea oil and allow us to start exploiting those opportunities. We have a welfare bill that's spiralling ever upwards. But what does she do? She removes the two-child benefit cap. And we have taxes. And we have taxes heading to the highest level in our history because of her choices, destroying the futures of men, women and children right up and down our country. No contrition, no apology, no plan to do anything about it. But it does not have to be this way, Mr. Speaker. At our conference, we set out how we can control public spending. £47 billion worth of savings, especially on the welfare bill. Some £23 billion in savings. Because we are a party that believes in work rather than benefits. We are a party that will do something about it. We are the party of work. They are the party of Benefit Street. We will bring taxes down to kickstart the economy, abolish stamp duty, scrap business rates for businesses on our high streets, a £5,000 tax cut for our young people, a cheap power plan. We will fix student loans. We will invest in apprenticeship. And through our golden rule, Mr. Speaker, we will get on top of the deficit. And by doing that, we will grow the economy. That's our plan. What is her plan? The truth, Mr. Speaker, is that she has no plan, or as her Health Secretary said, there is no growth strategy at all. And even if she did have a plan, she would be too weak to deliver it. The psychodramas swirling around Number 10, the almost daily scandals visiting the door of the Prime Minister, the sight of our once person at the highest level within the diplomatic service being carted away in a car by the police, and backbenchers calling the shots. The Chancellor's credibility has gone. The Prime Minister's Chief of Staff has gone. His Cabinet Secretary has gone. But somehow the Chancellor hangs on. But through the chaotic fog, Mr. Speaker, the drums are drawing ever closer. The British people deserve so much better. So for the hard-working people in our country crushed by taxes, by those denied employment, by the farmers and the family business owners who have suffered in fear for too long, for every hollowed-out high street, for every young person robbed of their future, for every elderly person struggling to survive, for the generations yet to come, we say go.
Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Thank you. Well, I know that the OBR. I know that the OBR didn't publish the forecast until I sat down, but I still think he could have done a little bit better than that. To be honest, I was hoping that the leader of the opposition was going to respond today, and after that performance, I expect she does too. Now, Mr. Speaker. Don't worry, I've got more. Mr. Speaker. The Right Honourable Gentleman said that they set out their economic policy at their conference a few weeks ago. Well, they had 14 years to set out their economic policy, and it's because of their economic policy that they're now sitting on those benches. Now, Mr. Speaker, today's performance is yet another reminder of how irrelevant the Conservative Party now is. And I hate to break it to the Shadow Chancellor, but people stopped listening to them a long while ago. And you can see why. Because whether it is in office or in opposition, the Right Honourable Gentleman's Party and his leader have been wrong about the economy time and time again. They opposed economic responsibility and backed Liz Truss. Wrong. They opposed closer ties to Europe and backed Brexit. Wrong. They oppose cuts in child poverty and want to repeat austerity. Wrong values, wrong economics. They are just plain wrong. After last year's budget, his leader predicted with characteristic foresight that borrowing would increase every year. She was wrong. Borrowing is now coming down faster. Faster than under the Tories. Well, that's not difficult because it went up. Faster than forecast in the autumn, and faster than in any other G7 economy. Last year, the Leader of the Opposition told us that energy bills would rise. She was wrong. They're coming down by £117 next month. And she told us that there would be no more Tory defections to reform. How's that one going? Now, let me return to the substance of his remarks, although I've had to reduce this section somewhat. The Shadow Chancellor mentioned student loans, but he neglected to mention that he was in the party that tripled university tuition fees, froze thresholds and oversaw higher interest rates, which led to the problems we are in today. Now, on special educational needs, they left a system in utter crisis, as every parent, every child and every school will tell you. So we'll take no lessons from them. But in terms of where the money's coming from, it's sat out today in the documents. But of course, the Shadow Chancellor doesn't know that because he didn't even bother listening to my statement. Now, the Shadow Chancellor mentioned defence, but he neglected to mention that it was his government that left office without any plan to fund their pledge to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence. And it is this government, and with me as Chancellor, that we are delivering the biggest increase in defence spending since the Cold War. Now, the Shadow Chancellor mentioned the welfare bill, and on this one, I've got to say it is a little bit rich, because he neglected to mention that the welfare bill rose twice as fast in the last Parliament, and that he was Secretary of State for Work and Pensions. Mr. Speaker, they broke the welfare system, and it is this government that is fixing it. Now, the Shadow Chancellor mentioned youth unemployment. And as I said, there is more that needs to be done. After they increased the number of young people not in education, employment or trading by 113,000 and slashed the number of young people starting apprenticeships by 40%. So, Mr. Speaker, we'll take no lessons from the party opposites. They're the arsonists, not the fire brigade. And if they can't be honest about the mess they've made, no wonder they can't recognise that we are fixing it. Today's forecast shows that debt is down, borrowing is down, inflation is down, and interest rates are down from 5.25% where they left them to 3.75% today. And investment, living standards and growth, they are all up. Let me break it to him and to his leader. There's no blank page for the Tory party, no year zero. They gave us chaos and instability. Labour is fixing it. They gave us austerity. Labour is investing in Britain. They gave us 14 years of barely managed decline, and we are reversing it. Now, we know that if they ever get the chance, they'll do all of the same again. More chaos, more kids in poverty, more and deeper cuts. It would be terrifying if there was any prospect at all that they would ever win an election again. Now, the leader of the opposition can keep turning up every week, but it's a total waste of time. Their party is the past and not the future. And I don't know what is more pathetic. The culprits who jumped ship and joined Reform and its Russian mates, or the culprits who stayed in the Conservative Party and pretended that the last 14 years never happened. Either way, the choice is clear. Investment with Labour or austerity with the Conservatives. Stability with Labour or more chaos with the Conservatives. Wrong leader, wrong choices, wrong plan. Only Labour has the right plan for our economy and for our country.
Chair of the Select Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I have to say, the sound and fury from the opposite, the Shadow Chancellor, is extraordinary when it was his government that ran this country and citizens into chaos with the interest rate increases and inflation increases under the Truss mini budget. I welcome today's forecast, partly, Mr. Speaker, because there's been so little speculation along the way, which I'm sure the Chancellor, the markets and the public and businesses welcome. That's the stability and confidence that we need to see. The Chancellor laid out her 3 choices to promote growth, and she will be appearing in front of the Select Committee next week, where we hope to probe her further. But in the meantime, can she tell us which of those 3 areas is she most excited about to grow the British economy?
Chancellor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I thank my honourable friend for that question. I think the biggest change that we can make is ensuring that growth takes place in all parts of our country, rather than just a few people in a few parts of Britain, and the changes to economic geography that we started by changing the Green Book to give every part of our country the fair chance to get the investment and opportunity that they deserve means that growth will benefit everybody, not just a small few.
Daisy Cooper, Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The country is paying the price for 2 anti-growth Labour budgets. Growth has flatlined. Youth unemployment is up, and the cost of living crisis grinds on, pushing people and businesses to the brink. So we are pleading with the Chancellor. Please, for the sake of our country, put a laser-like focus on getting a better trade and defence deal with Europe so we can protect our country, get Britain growing again and end the cost of living crisis. The Chancellor says that she will be making an announcement about trade relationships in a couple of weeks, but this government is 18 months in already. The Chancellor could have used today's spring statement to announce the government's intention to negotiate a new UK-EU customs union to kickstart growth, cut red tape for business and build ties with our reliable allies in the face of Trump's chaos. Why didn't she? Mr. Speaker, the spring statement comes at a critical time for our national and economic security. OBR projections will soon be out of date. Trump's illegal actions in Iran this weekend will be felt in people's pockets right here in Britain, with the cost of fuel and food set to rise. The Chancellor could have used today's spring statement to scrap the fuel duty hike, which is due this September. Why didn't she? Mr. Speaker, young people are angry and fed up. The next generation of young people could always expect that they would have a better life than the generation before. But that promise for today's young people has been ripped away. Almost 1 million young people, the highest in more than 10 years, are now unemployed. We are facing a youth unemployment crisis. Mr. Speaker, the Chancellor's Youth Guarantee is simply a sticking plaster for the damage that has been done by the jobs tax. The Chancellor could have used today's spring statement to reverse the jobs tax changes that have undermined job opportunities for young people and part-time workers. Why didn't she? Mr. Speaker, graduates are being ripped off. They've studied hard. Mr. Speaker, graduates are being ripped off.
Yes, that's right. She's right.
They have studied hard. They have studied hard. They have done everything they were told to do. But they are facing eye-watering repayment costs and they are struggling to get on in life. Mr. Speaker, on this issue, it is a plague on all our houses. Partisan point scoring does no favours to those young people. We have set out what we would do. The Chancellor could have used today's spring statement to end the repayment threshold freeze, putting £100 back in graduates' pockets in the first year, rising to £210 in the third. Why didn't she?
Yeah, absolutely right.
And Mr. Speaker, with great instability and conflict around the world and a move away from the rules-based system to great power politics, we must look urgently at building our national energy, defence and food security. And in so doing, we can and must turn the necessity of building national resilience into strategic opportunities for economic growth. We welcome the fact that the government has done a deal for helicopters with Leonardo as a result of the calls from these Liberal Democrat benches, especially honourable members from the South West who have raised this issue week in, week out. But the Chancellor could have used today's spring statement to launch a new defence bonds programme as part of a plan to spend 3% of GDP on defence by 2030. Why didn't she? And Mr. Speaker, finally, to come full circle, as I said, the country has paid the price for 2 anti-growth Labour budgets, and the OBR today is clear. The downgrade in 2026 in growth is bigger than the upgrade in the next 2 years combined. We have got to stop the short-term cycle of short-term Treasury tax grabs over long-term growth. Mr. Speaker, our United Kingdom is an amazing country and has enormous potential, but we cannot take this for granted. We must accept that we are stuck in a rut, stuck in a doom loop of low economic growth, and that is a big problem. I urge the Chancellor to take these measures that I have outlined to protect our country, to get Britain growing again and to end the cost of living crisis.
Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The honourable member gives less an economic programme and more a wish list of things that she would like to see, without any means at all of paying for them. She seems oblivious also to the things that governments are doing. She says that we should have a closer relationship with Europe. I agree. I said it in my speech. But she omits to mention that that is exactly what the government are doing. We have taken action, as the honourable lady knows, with an SPS deal to back British agriculture and on Erasmus. And it is this Labour government which is working with our EU neighbours to tackle illegal gangs and to improve our security. The honourable member calls for a big cut in taxes. But VAT, at 20% as a standard rate, is the rate that her party introduced when they were part of the coalition agreement. It has been ever since that they were in that coalition. We've provided £4.3 billion of support in business rates and further support for pubs and live music venues. If they want to deliver on this enormous unfunded promise, perhaps she'd like to tell us which public services the Liberal Democrats would like to cut this time. I mean, they cut enough public services when they had a chance and they were in office, but they're too scared to tell us which ones they would do today. Is it the NHS? Is it schools? Is it investment in our regional transport infrastructure? Who knows, because she won't tell us. And it is quite extraordinary. And it is quite extraordinary to hear the Liberal Democrats have the nerve to raise student finance. When they trebled tuition fees when they were in government and created the Plan 2 scheme. In fact, it was a Liberal Democrat Secretary of State who oversaw that policy. And the leader of the Liberal Democrats was in that cabinet meeting when they signed off that decision. So we'll take no lectures from them about how to support our young people. Now, the Honourable Lady says that they've set out what they would do on student finance. Is that a bit like what you did in 2010 when you set out what you were going to do on student finance? Because I remember in 2010, what was it? What were they going to do with tuition fees? That was it. They were going to abolish tuition fees. But that's not what they did, is it? What did they do? Oh, they tripled them. So why should we believe a word that the Honourable Lady says now on student finance? So some of us haven't forgotten that they teamed up with the Tories to cut our police, cut local government and cut our armed forces spending too. And, Mr Speaker, we are dealing with the consequences. That is why we are investing in our public services, to fix the damage that they did with the Conservatives. What have they been doing? Opposing our investment in the NHS, because that is what it means when you say you want to reverse the tax changes that we've brought in. Because the only reason we've got £29 billion more a year to spend in the NHS is because of the tax changes that we made. You can't have one without the other. The Liberal Democrats need to understand that. They're opposing our plans to build more homes. They're opposing our plans to make work pay. They opposed VAT on private schools to help the 93% of kids in our state schools. Mr Speaker, they are simply not serious.
Yuan Yang.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I thank the Chancellor for her strong statement and in particular for her words on deepening our alliances with our European partners. This is crucial for bringing down the cost of food and for healing the economic self-harm done by the party opposite. The Bank of England has said that her cuts to energy bills will help bring inflation down to around its target from next month. Will she commit to going further and continue to shield our constituents from global price shocks?
Chancellor.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Bank of England forecast that the actions that I took in the budget last year would reduce inflation by around 0.4 percentage points and that inflation would be back close to target from April. That reflects not just taking £150 off energy bills, but also freezing prescription charges and freezing rail fares as well. Of course, the events unfolding in Iran and the Middle East have resulted over the last couple of days in gas prices going up by more than 60% and oil prices going up by more than 10%, which shows why the plan that we've had to take money off energy bills but also ensure our public finances are in a stronger place, mean that we're in a better place than we would have been 18 months ago after the mess left by the party opposite.
Sir Jeremy Hunt.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Given what the Chancellor has just said about gas prices going up nearly 50% in the last week, her budget promise to reduce household energy bills by £150 is going to ring hollow for many people. But if cost of living is the real concern, isn't the biggest mistake to increase taxes by £66 billion? That is the equivalent of nearly £2,300 per household. And if that money is needed for public services, nearly all of that, £54 billion in fact, could be got by reducing the welfare bill to 2019 levels. So is it sustainable to keep raising taxes on people in work in order to pay ever more benefits to people not in work?
Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Well, huge respect for the right honourable gentleman, but he left a massive black hole in the public finances. There hadn't been a spending review for years, and during that time, inflation had gone through the roof because the Conservatives lost control of the public finances, and so we had to find the money to properly fund our National Health Service. And it is a bit rich for the party opposite to say that we should bring welfare spending down when they presided over a huge increase in welfare spending. And on the burden of taxation, our choices ensured that it is those with the broadest shoulders that are paying higher taxes. We got rid of the non-dom tax status. We're introducing the higher value council tax, VAT on private school fees, the energy profits levy. We are ensuring that it is those with the broadest shoulders that pay the higher prices, rather than the increases in inflation and interest rates in the last Parliament, which hit working people.
Liam Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The plan the Chancellor has just set out this afternoon shows that inflation is down, debt is down, bills are down, headroom is up, growth is up, and living standards up. I'd say that's testament to a plan for stability that's working. But that stability would be undermined if the Chancellor surrendered to the idea of £47 billion worth of unfunded tax cuts set out by the party opposite. So will she resist those calls, and as fiscal headroom opens up, will she look again at what can be done to drive down energy costs for small business and genuinely reform business rates so that we are backing our wealth creators and not gambling with public finances like the party opposite?
Chancellor of the Exchequer.
I thank my right honourable friend for that question. We are backing the innovators with the reforms that we made in the budget last year to make it easier to list in London, easier to raise finance in the UK, and we have permanently changed business rates to have a lower multiplier on high street businesses and smaller businesses, particularly in the retail, hospitality and leisure sector. We did that by putting £4.3 billion into the system. All of that money would have been withdrawn by the party opposite.
John Glenn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Undoubtedly, every government deals with different challenges, and I note that the Chancellor did not mention the challenge of COVID in the last period of government. And when I was in the Treasury, I did everything I could to support businesses with bounce-back loans, with support for our public services, and clearly that has significantly scarred the economy. But when the Chancellor last stood at the dispatch box, the economic and fiscal outlook said that growth this year will be 1.4%. It's now 1.1% and flat over the period. The big strategic choice that this Chancellor faces, as the world is different in her tenure in office, is will she grip welfare spending at a time of grave insecurity in the world? Because an open promise to raise defence spending sometime over a 5-year interval will not cut it for this country's best interest.
Right. Chancellor of the Exchequer.
The honourable gentleman mentions the work that the previous government did on COVID, and of course it was right to support people with furlough and bounce-back loans, but it wasn't right to hand money to friends and donors of the Conservative Party with COVID contracts, and we are getting the money back that they wasted. On welfare, I'll say it again, it is a little bit rich of the party opposite, especially when the Shadow Chancellor was previously the Work and Pension Secretary, to talk about welfare spending when they presided over a 113,000 increase in young people not in education, employment or training. We've already made reforms to universal credit to narrow the gap between the health element and the standard element. That will ensure that more people are out looking for work, and employment has increased since the start of last year.
Jim McMahon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Fair day's pay for a fair day's work is a fundamental part of the British contract. But for many self-employed people and those on low wages, they are paying to work because HMRC have failed to update their mileage rates for now 15 years, in which case petrol, road tax and the rest has increased significantly. So can the Chancellor do what the Conservatives failed to do and ask HMRC to update their mileage rates so working people aren't paying to go to work?
Chancellor.
I'm very happy to arrange a meeting between my honourable friend and the responsible minister. I recognise that this is an issue, and one being raised with me by the trade union Unison, amongst others. This doesn't just affect self-employed people, it also affects people in work.
All right. Sir Aldney.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Unemployment in the 3 months to December reached 5.2%, the highest rate for nearly 5 years, and youth unemployment has hit a staggering 16%. Training, hiring, retaining a skilled workforce are issues affecting businesses of all kinds across the country. The 2024 budget added over £5 billion of employment costs onto retailers, almost half of which came from the changes to employer NICs, with the cost of employing a full-time worker in a retail job rising by 10% and by 13% for those working part-time. 1 in 5 people's first job is in retail. So what steps is the government taking to tackle these unaffordably high unemployment costs for these businesses that provide entry levels for young people into our job market?
Chancellor.
What the Honourable Lady fails to mention is that the OBR forecasts that unemployment comes down in every year of the forecast and ends at a lower rate than it started. And it would be a little bit more plausible for the Honourable Lady to make these points if she didn't oppose everything we're doing to grow the economy, whether that is a third runway at Heathrow Airport or building the homes that families desperately need.
Jessica Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The rail fare freeze benefits constituents who saw rail fares rise by 60% since 2010. Also, the announcement of 2 new railway stations in Newport East recently is warmly welcomed. Can I encourage the Chancellor to continue to invest in Welsh transport infrastructure?
Chancellor.
I thank my honourable friend for that question, and constituents in her Newport constituency will benefit when they commute to work or to college or to meet friends in Cardiff, Swansea, Bristol and elsewhere. But in addition to that, we are also building new railway stations and investing in new transport infrastructure in Wales with the £450 million that we announced at the spending review last year.
Dame Caroline Davies.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The Chancellor's words on defence just simply do not reflect the reality at a time when the world has never felt more unstable. Every corner of our armed forces is currently being asked to find cuts. People in Gosport only have to look out of their window to see all our Type 45 destroyers are currently laid up in Portsmouth Harbour. And this is the first year since the 1980s that we haven't had a ship in the Gulf at a time when the Middle East is a tinderbox. The RFA is on its knees. Defence companies are being tied up with bureaucracy, dither and delay. She's mentioned a couple of contracts, but so many of them are bogged down with dither and delay from this government. She's gaslighting the British people.
Quite right.
This is a disaster. This is a disaster for our defence. It's a disaster for our armed forces. When is she going to face reality?
I am the Chancellor that has overseen the biggest uplift in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. We are spending more on defence than the previous government was spending. And that is why yesterday I was able to announce a helicopter contract worth £1 billion. It's why last week a new frigate came from Rosyth. And it's why we've been able to invest in the Typhoon jets. So I won't take any lessons, frankly, from the party opposite when we are increasing defence spending and they oversaw a cut.
Jane Kirkham.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the changes to the Green Book to support investment in coastal and rural areas. Can the Chancellor confirm it will lead to infrastructure investment in transport, for example, in places like Cornwall, to support the investment being made in our industries, and particularly that £50 million into our critical minerals strategy?
Chancellor of the Exchequer.
I thank my honourable friend for that question and for the work that she's done to promote the investment opportunities in Cornwall. The Green Book means that for the first time, different parts of the country, urban, rural and coastal communities will all have their fair chance of getting the investment that they need. And this government's critical minerals strategy will have a direct impact, as it already is, on Cornwall, where the National Wealth Fund are investing in lithium and tin, as I've seen firsthand when I was there last summer.
Dave Duggan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A 40-minute self-aggrandising monologue saying how wonderful everything is in the economy. Does the Chancellor have any clue how her tone-deaf monologue will have landed in the real economy, where growth has been downgraded, where unemployment is soaring, and where the cost of energy has just spiked? Nothing in her statement about what she intends to do on a strategic level about when energy goes to the price it was during the height of the Ukraine crisis. Nothing in there. So will she, rather than read her pre-prepared SNP attack lines, will she guarantee that she will step in and protect bill payers if these prices endure?
Mr. Speaker, we have taken action to reduce energy bills by £150 from next month. And as I said in my speech, because of the stability that we've returned to the economy, the cuts in interest rates, the cuts in inflation, in interest rates, and the cost of government borrowing means that despite the headwinds from the Middle East and Iran, we are in a strong position to be able to respond to that.
Bill Esterson.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, the conflict in the Middle East is, of course, a reminder of the need to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels, which set the price of our energy bills for consumers and for businesses 80% of the time. Gas sets the price for electricity. So the £117 off bills which she announced in the budget is very, very welcome, of course, but will she recommit to giving that long-term stability in our energy prices, bringing bills down for the long term by supporting investment in the generation of renewables, of nuclear, of expanding the grid and of battery storage, which will help domestic and industrial consumers at the same time?
Chancellor.
I thank the Chair of the Select Committee for that important question. And he's absolutely right. Whether it is the successful auction round 7 that we've just completed for investment in new renewable energy, or the planning reforms to make it easier to build the grid connections and also the wind farms, we're taking the action to secure our energy supplies. And, of course, the investment we put in through the spending review last year to both Sizewell C and also to small modular reactors that will be built in Wales by Rolls-Royce.
Esther Magpie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the Chancellor now accept that there is a correlation between increasing national insurance contribution on employers and higher levels of unemployment?
Yeah.
Or does she still believe those two things are not connected in any way?
What there's definitely a correlation between is the number of years the Conservatives are in office and how much worse off working people are.
Joanna Baxter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome my right honourable friend's statement today and her commitment to growth in all parts of the United Kingdom. So I wonder if she could set out for us in a little more detail the Barnett consequentials arising from her statement, and whether she agrees with me that it's increasingly important that in May we elect a government that will spend that money wisely, and that means electing a Labour government in Holyrood led by Anna Sarwar.
Chancellor.
I thank my honourable friend for that question. In the spending review last year, we set out a record settlement for the Scottish Government as well as for the Welsh Government and the Northern Ireland Executive. And I can tell the House and my honourable friend that today, because of the decisions we're making, I can announce an additional £900 million Ardell spending and £20 million CDEL spending over the spending review between 26-27 and 2028-29 for the Scottish Government. And like my honourable friend, I very much hope that it will be Anna Sarwar and a Labour government spending that money rather than the SNP wasting it and presiding over higher NHS waiting lists.
Robert Jenrick.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Chancellor's like a rogue landlord who keeps squeezing the tenant with higher and higher rent. All the while, the property is going to rack and ruin. I don't know who she's speaking to, but she needs to get out and talk to hard-working people who are hard up right now. People worried about their bills and the lack of good jobs. Not the extremists that she cozies up to for votes. Now, the next scheme that the Chancellor has, to raise taxes on working people is to hike fuel duty at the pumps. Will she cancel it? Will she give some relief for care workers, for white van men, for hard-working people who get up early in the morning and drive to work, and who are the backbone of this economy?
Chancellor of the Exchequer.
May I be the first to congratulate the right honourable gentleman on his new role. I know it wasn't the first job he wanted, or indeed the second one, but a spirited intervention. I'm not sure if he shared this one with George Osborne. I could venture maybe one piece of advice. The thing about betraying your party is that you have to stop asking your old friends for advice. But perhaps, given that he called his new colleague Zia useless a couple of months ago, he needs all the friends that he can have. Now, it might have been a couple of weeks ago, but the right honourable gentleman used to be in a party that was going to get rid of the fuel duty support just 3 months after losing office. That was in the plans that we inherited and we scrapped them. As a result, we have extended... Well, they say it's rubbish, but it was actually in their last budget. And party's budget and his party's manifesto.
Abrahams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I welcome my right honourable friend, the Chancellor's statement, and absolutely agree that this year, this is when the British public will start to feel the difference of having a Labour government. But I wonder if my right honourable friend could just expand on what she's doing to ensure that all dimensions of inequality, income, wealth, power and health are tackled, and that these benefits are felt all across the country and in all communities.
Chancellor Exchequer.
I thank my honourable friend for that question, and the OBR confirmed today by the end of this Parliament people will be £1,000 a year better off. That compares to a fall in living standards under the previous government. And in terms of my honourable friend's constituency in Oldham and Saddleworth, I know that she has Pride in Place funding to ensure that we are investing in those places that were forgotten and left behind under 14 years of Conservative government.
I hope the Chancellor will accept that I'm someone who's challenged successive governments over inadequate defence spending. And if she does, will she also accept that it's not a wise idea to keep comparing current defence spending with the levels of defence spending, quotes, since the end of the Cold War? We're not in since the end of the Cold War now. We're in a hot war in Europe, and we're in an incendiary war in the Middle East. Does she know what percentage of GDP Mrs. Thatcher spent during the Cold War years of the 1980s? I'll give her a clue. It was twice what we spend now in terms of percentage GDP.
Chancellor.
The honourable gentleman stood on a manifesto a year and a half ago that had absolutely no explanation of how their party was going to increase defence spending. This government have increased defence spending, and so instead of criticising, I'm surprised he didn't welcome it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Chancellor for outlining how we will finally turn the wheels on the 14 years of suffering that many constituents in my constituency and across the country have been feeling. Many people still complain about the cost of living and they're impatient for that change. But hopefully by what the Chancellor set out this afternoon, we'll start to see that turning. One of the issues I wanted to flag with the Chancellor is, and rightly so, we are seeing a change in business rates. One of my constituents who owns a business, Chocolate Dino, highlighted that central London rateable values are still quite high, and the small business rates relief thresholds have remained static. This is having such a big impact on independent and small businesses. I just wanted to ask the Chancellor if she has any more additional areas where she can look into this so that we can see those businesses who are the backbone of UK PLC thriving.
Chancellor.
I thank my honourable friend for that question, and in her own Vauxhall constituency, thousands of children will be lifted out of poverty from next month because this Labour government has chosen to get rid of the two-child policy that was introduced by the party opposite and, of course, supported by their Tory Tribute Act friends over there. In terms of business rates, I'm sure that the Business Secretary or relevant minister would be happy to meet with my honourable friend, but the changes we've made does mean that there is a permanently lower multiplier for smaller businesses and high street businesses.
Richard Ford.
Speaker, there are many small and medium-sized enterprises that add value to our towns and villages, but I'm concerned about their survival. For example, the Community Waffle House in Axminster is a community interest company that is struggling under the pressure of last year's national insurance increases. Axminster Waffle boasts £3.9 million in public sector cost avoidance and value created, judged by the DCMS Wellbeing Valuation for Reduced Loneliness. Will she consider VAT relief to take account of the public sector cost avoidance by the CIC and other hospitality businesses?
Chancellor.
This Labour government have permanently reduced the multiplier faced by small businesses and high street businesses, the business rate system that we inherited from the previous government. And the honourable gentleman mentions VAT. When Labour left office in 2010, VAT was 17.5%, and the Conservative government, with the help of the Liberal Democrats, increased it to 20%, and it's been there now for 25 years. If you want to cut taxes, you also have to explain which public services you're going to cut. We've increased spending by £29 billion on the health service. That was the right decision, but it was only possible because of the tax decisions we've made.
Thank you,
Mr Speaker. The stability the Chancellor has brought back to our economy has allowed us to allocate record levels of infrastructure investment. Alongside this, a Green Book review creates the conditions for meaningful investment in previously left behind places like Lancashire. Yet, as the review highlights, places like Lancashire, which do not yet have a mayor, can also lack the capacity and capability to bring forward fully investable business cases. In recent months, myself, Lancashire colleagues and leaders of Lancashire Combined Authority have written to Government asking for interim capacity funding to develop fully investable proposals. The need is urgent, so would the Chancellor meet with me and colleagues to discuss how we can bring forward the game-changing growth projects that Lancashire needs?
Chancellor.
I thank my honourable friend for that question, and he's a strong advocate for his constituents in Rossendale and Darwin, and also was a big advocate for the reforms to the Green Book that we managed to bring in at the budget last year. And because of those changes, we will now look more favourably at investment opportunities in urban areas and in rural areas, in coastal communities, and in places that have been left behind. And be very keen to welcome any suggestions for specific investments in his constituency, either through the British Business Bank, UK Export Finance or the National Wealth Fund, all of which have had its budgets expanded under this Labour government.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Chancellor stands there and says that living standards are up and the economy is growing, but people can see the reality in their everyday lives. Unemployment up month on month, energy bills higher than when they came to power, and the latest figures, in fact, show that per person our economy is shrinking. Yet she stands there and says she has the right economic plan for our country. Does she have any idea how that sounds to people out there who are working harder than ever with less and less left over at the end of every month?
Chancellor.
It's good to see the honourable member still on those benches. I thought that she was going to be joining her Tory Tribute Act friends over there with the MP for Newark. What the Office of Budget Responsibility document shows today is that people are going to be £1,000 better off by the end of this Parliament, whereas under the previous government, living standards actually fell, and GDP per capita by the end of this Parliament is set to be 5.6% higher, whereas under the previous Conservative government, GDP per capita fell.
Toby Perkins.
Very much indeed, Mr Speaker. My right honourable friend will hear a lot from politicians today, although it appears not from Reform because they've all gone. But does she agree that the most important people to listen to is not the sound and fury in this room, but that those who actually lend money to the government believe that the proposals that she has are worth lending money against, and for that reason the amount that we'll be spending on debt interest is falling, and that unlike the party opposite, they think that the UK is a good credit risk in comparison to those other G7 nations. And can she say any more about how she can bring these electricity prices down to really support that growth that she's all about?
I thank my honourable friend for that question, and he knows that if we can improve living standards and also reduce how much we're spending on servicing the debt racked up by the Conservatives, we'll have more money to spend on the priorities of people in Chesterfield and elsewhere. But what the numbers today confirm is that we will be spending £4 billion less on debt interest next year than was forecast even in the budget just a couple of months ago, and that is because of the stability that we've managed to return to the economy. Under the Conservative government, before Liz Truss, we were spending the average of the G7 on our debt servicing costs. That rocketed under Liz Truss. We've already managed to reduce some of that borrowing premium, but if we continue, we have a £15 billion prize on offer, and that will be money to spend in our communities and on the priorities of working people, whereas under the previous government, we just spent more and more on servicing debt interest costs.
John Barrett.
Mr Speaker, the result in Gorton and Denton shows voters want bolder action from politicians against sky-high privatised bills and rents and no families left struggling in poverty. So, will the Chancellor listen and scrap her dysfunctional fiscal rules and start with scrapping the overall family benefit cap, which still means over 200,000 children aren't getting the help they need to live, if not a nice life, at least one without needless, grinding hardship?
Chancellor.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I believe in fair taxes and I believe the wealthy should pay their fair share. But I do believe in doing so in a credible way which actually delivers for our constituents. That's why, in my 2 budgets, I've ended the non-dom loophole, charged VAT and business rates on private school fees, raised capital gains tax and introduced a high-value property tax, which I believe that the Green Party actually oppose in London. The honourable member failed to mention her party's policy on defence and defence spending. This is important, especially now. We know that the Green Party want to leave NATO. She doesn't want to say it, but it is her party's policy.
Alison Taylor.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Does the Chancellor agree that sound management of the economy has provided the fiscal headroom to invest in large infrastructure projects? And can she contrast that with Scotland, where the SNP government cancelled the Glasgow Airport railway link and sold off the land at a loss?
Chancellor.
Well, to be honest, when the SNP get involved in infrastructure projects like trying to build a couple of ferries, it all seems to go horribly wrong, which is why, despite the fact that they've had a record settlement from us, NHS waiting lists in Scotland continue to increase, whilst in England and Wales, under Labour governments, they're falling.
Graham Stewart.
Mr Speaker, business has been crushed by the taxes brought in by this Chancellor. And, of course, just a year ago, in a fairly gloomy forecast by the OBR then, they were suggesting 1.8% GDP growth, 1.8 over the forecast period. That has now been reduced to 1.5%. And if the central mission of this Chancellor and supposedly this government is economic growth, how can it be that she can stand there today and say it's working, when on her central directive, the central mission, it's been marked by the OBR that she's going in exactly the wrong direction, making all our constituents poorer. Can she please explain that to the House?
Chancellor.
That is just completely wrong. What the OBR say today is that people will be £1,000 a year better off by the end of the forecast period, that GDP per capita will increase by 5.6% after having fallen under the previous government, and growth, productivity growth, was revised down, yes, at the budget because of the policies of the previous government. It has not been revised today.
Those are right.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I was a young person whilst the Tories were in power, and the reality is they locked my generation out of home ownership, and living standards were worse than our parents, and public services that we relied on growing up were cut because of decisions made by their government. And I remembered a mini-budget that meant that I saw interest rates on my student loan rise. A student loan that is so high because of the plan that they introduced under the coalition government, and because they changed maintenance loans to maintenance grants to loans. So does my right honourable friend agree that it's only the Labour Party that can change this country for young people, and they finally have a government that will match their ambition?
Chancellor.
I thank my honourable friend for that question. And when I was visiting Kettering with my honourable friend recently, it was just ahead of the investment, the capital investment in a new SEND provision in her constituency, so that more young people, some of the most vulnerable, can be educated locally in Kettering with better outcomes for them. In terms of student finances, the last government lost control of inflation, and of course student loans under Plan 2 and other schemes is linked to inflation. Because we have reduced inflation, we will be reducing how much people pay in interest on their student loans, and that is the best way for helping them. And I hear some shouting from the opposite benches. Inflation went to more than 11% when they were in government, and they froze the threshold. On Plan 2 student loans, which they introduced for many years.
Sammy Wilson.
Mr Speaker, the Chancellor raised a laugh at the start of her statement today when she said that she was following the right policies for this country. policies which have resulted in lowered economic growth, higher unemployment, people staggering under an increased tax burden and businesses being damaged by employment taxes. And yet she has shown no change. Why has she not addressed the issues of lowering the cost of employing people, of reducing the tax burden on hard-working people to help them with the cost of living crisis, and of reducing energy prices which have been driven up by the net zero policies followed by this government? Does she realise that people will be angered and amazed at her complacency today?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, GDP per capita, which is what matters in people's everyday lives, has been revised up 5.6% over the course of this Parliament. Unemployment is set to fall in every year and end the Parliament at a lower rate than it started. We're taking £150 off energy bills from next month. And in the spending review last year, we announced a record settlement for the Northern Ireland Executive, and I can confirm today that that settlement increases further by £380 million over 3 years for Ardell spending and £10 million for capital spending, money that you can spend on the priorities of the people in Northern Ireland.
Catherine West.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and could I commend the Chancellor for her laser-like focus on young people, including apprenticeship starts and also maintenance grants. And could I ask her to work with the Education Secretary so that by the autumn, when we know exactly the impact of this awful war in the Middle East, whether there's any help that can be given to graduates so that they can become the next people to get mortgages and get onto the housing ladder?
Claire.
I thank my honourable friend for that question, and the £800 million that we're spending on the youth guarantee, the increase in money we're spending on further education and apprenticeships will all benefit young people, including the 60% of young people who never go to university. But we are also reintroducing maintenance grants for the poorest students to help them. We are also reducing inflation, which will mean that people pay less back every month on their student loans. And my honourable friend rightly mentions that it is the budget where we set out a major fiscal policy. But I would also say, with the events that are unfolding in the Middle East and Iran at the moment, we do need to make sure that we can fund all of the government's priorities and all the priorities of our constituents.
Ben Obsejekti.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We've heard several different discussions here on defence today, but may I remind the Chancellor that yesterday morning an Iranian Shahed drone struck the runway at RAF Akrotiri. Now, that wasn't taken out by any counter-drone technology because that was due to be announced in the Defence Investment Plan that the Armed Forces Minister informed me was due to be announced in autumn 2025. It's now spring 2026 and we still haven't seen the Defence Investment Plan. We've had a budget since then and we've now had the spring forecast. Could the Chancellor assure us that all of the recommendations that are pledged to by the government will be delivered from the SDR in the Defence Investment Plan when it's announced?
Chancellor.
Well, I can assure you that we'll be able to do an awful lot more because we're increasing defence spending compared to the legacy that was left by the Conservative government. The biggest increase in defence spending since the Cold War because of the decisions that we have made as a government and because of the decisions that our Prime Minister made at the weekend. We're degrading the capability of Iran to continue these attacks.
Luke Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Chancellor for her statement. The thing that animates my constituents most is the cost of living and the crisis in their living standards, a crisis that came about as a result of the failed economic policies of the party opposite, who left with the worst record on living standards on record in the last Parliament. So my constituents particularly welcome the action on energy bills, rail fares and childcare. But can the Chancellor confirm that in every policy, legislation and budget in future, she and the government will continue to focus on driving up my constituents' living standards?
Chancellor.
I thank my honourable friend for his question, and people in Basingstoke will benefit when they commute to work on a train, when they pay for their prescriptions and when they get their energy bills next month that will see them come down. But also by reducing borrowing, and the cost of borrowing means we've got more money to spend on the priorities of people in Basingstoke rather than just paying the interest on the debt racked up by the Conservative Party.
Harriet Cross. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The OBR's forecast has again downgraded oil and gas revenues
From March to November last year, it was downgraded by over 41%. From November to March now, it's been downgraded by another 20%. Ouch. By 2030, we're now expecting only £100 million of tax returns from the oil and gas industry, which used to return billions every year. Madness. That's because production is falling and investment is going abroad. When the Chancellor meets with oil and gas companies tomorrow, and I hope she has a great meeting, they will tell her that the reason and the thing that they need is the EPL to be taken away, because that's costing jobs, investment and energy security. Is she going to listen to them, or will she keep ignoring the sector?
Our country will continue to rely on oil and gas from the North Sea for many years to come. But I would just encourage the Honourable Lady to read the documents properly, because the reason why the money from the Energy Profits Levy, and this is just the Energy Profits Levy, not all the other taxes paid, the reason it falls is because the oil and gas prices have fallen so sharply since the budget last year. But of course, in the last couple of days, those oil and gas prices have increased hugely. The reason the Conservative government introduced the Energy Profits Levy in the first place was because the increase in oil and gas prices, and used that money to take money off people's bills. And so that's just from the... Look, the Honourable Lady just needs to go back and do her homework. That is just from the Energy Profits Levy and reflects the lower energy prices. Those energy prices, as some of her colleagues have mentioned, are unlikely to persist after what Iran has done.
Callum Anderson.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the OECD and the IMF have both recognised the importance of the government's fiscal discipline, which is important given the increasingly volatile global economic environment. Can she set out more actions that she is taking with others across government to control public spending so that the government can prioritise the long-term investments that boost our global competitiveness and dynamism and fulfil our defence spending requirements?
Chancellor.
I thank my honourable friend for that question. And by controlling public spending, we can get the cost of borrowing down. And we saw this in the most recent public finance numbers, which showed the biggest ever January surplus, biggest ever surplus on the government national accounts. And that means that we've got more money to spend on people's priorities because we are controlling spending and bringing in the tax revenue that is needed. That's the first time it's happened, and it's because the choices that we have made as a government.
Thank
you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Chancellor refers to opportunities young people deserve. However, hundreds of college students in my constituency of North Devon have spent days and weeks unable to travel to college due to flooding and rail closures. Can the government confirm that it will invest in their life chances by doing more to upgrading our transport infrastructure, especially our rural railway lines, such as the Tarka line in North Devon, because it's not working at present?
I'm very happy to ask the Secretary of State for Transport or one of her ministers to meet with the honourable gentleman to talk about the specific issues in his constituency. We are committed as a government, as he knows, to increase capital investment by £120 billion over the course of this Parliament, because we know how important that infrastructure is, whether it's energy infrastructure to get down energy bills, rail infrastructure to get people to work, or digital infrastructure to make the most of the AI revolution.
Damien Griffith.
Indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, I recognise the wisdom of increasing budget headroom, and I very much welcome the record budget settlement the Chancellor has given to Welsh Government so that they can fund and improve public services. But to fund this, can she explain how she is ensuring that those with the most wealth pay their fair share so that our Welsh Labour aspiration of fairness you can feel becomes a reality for my constituents in Llanelli?
I thank my my honourable friend for that question, and I also want to take this opportunity to confirm that because of the choices in today's spring forecast, the settlement for the Welsh Government over the next 3 fiscal years will mean an additional £540 million RDEL and 15 million CDEL to spend on the priorities of the Welsh people. Specifically on ensuring that the wealthiest pay their fair share, that's something that is very important to me and to this government, which is why we've introduced VAT and business rates on private schools, why we've got rid of the non-dom tax status and are introducing a high-value council tax to ensure that it is those with the broadest shoulders who pay their fair share, and as a result we need to ask less from ordinary working people.
Ben Lake.
Small businesses form a critical role of the economy of places such as Ceredigion and Preseli, and as the Chancellor will know, increased energy costs has been a real pressure on the ability of small businesses to operate in recent years. And so can I ask the Chancellor, in light of the events of the weekend and the crisis in the Middle East, what consideration is the government giving to additional support to help small businesses meet the rising energy costs?
We are only a couple of days into this conflict, and it is important to see where things go in the next few days. And as I said in my statement, I'm in regular contact with international counterparts right across the world, including in the Middle East, with the Governor of the Bank of England and with sectors, both maritime and oil and gas, who are most affected by what is happening now. But I think you can see by the actions of this government, whether it is taking £150 off domestic energy bills or the extension of the supercharger, which comes in next month to help energy-intensive industries with their energy costs, that we're determined to help people. But in addition, as I just said to my honourable friend from Llanelli, the spring forecast today includes an additional £540 million of Ardell spending and £15 million of CDL spending, so that the Welsh Government can spend on the priorities of the Welsh people.
Karen Moon.
Whereas, Madam Deputy Speaker, through the National Wealth Fund and the Kernow Industrial Growth Fund, this Labour government has invested over £100 million into Cornish critical minerals and renewables, which in turn has unlocked vast sums of private sector investment. Does the Chancellor agree with me that it's precisely because of this government's careful nurturing of the UK economy that means that she can help unleash the Cornish Celtic tiger, and while opposition parties scurry around the TV studios trying to run down the UK economy, she's just getting on with the job of fixing the mess that they created?
Chancellor.
I thank my honourable friend for that question. And there are huge opportunities in the Cornish economy, in defence, in energy and critical minerals, as I saw when I was in Redruth and Camborne and in other parts of Cornwall last summer, including visiting the South Crofty tin mine, which has had National Wealth Fund money. That, alongside the Kernow plan, gives me great confidence that the opportunities that exist in Cornwall will be invested in by both this government through our public finance institutions and also the private sector.
Dr. Luke Evans.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I want to raise the issue of the freezing of thresholds and the effect on state pension, because when the Chancellor did it in the budget, she told Martin Lewis that some people will be pulled into paying tax and won't have to pay small amounts of tax and won't have to do a tax return. Well, the updated forecast now says this year 600,000 pensioners will be brought into paying tax and going to 1 million by the end of this Parliament. So could she set out what the definition is of small amounts of tax and what the mechanism is she will use to make sure they don't have to do a tax return?
Chancellor.
As I said after the budget last year, if you just get the basic state pension, you will not be paying tax. We will be setting out more details of that in the coming months.
Amanda Martin.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In Ports of North, we know the reality we inherited from the previous government. People felt it in a closed shipyard, in stretched households, in Tory food banks that keep popping up everywhere, higher mortgage struggling, and high streets and pubs closing, education and send cuts and cuts to apprenticeships. I know many are desperate for rapid change, but I know and hope today that many can see from our statement we are on the right track. Retail sales rising, wages rising, 6 interest rate cuts, and defence investment backing jobs in my city, and a renewed focus on send and education apprenticeships. Does the Chancellor agree with me that coastal communities like Portsmouth, stability and long-term investment and not cuts is how we can build household confidence, put more money in pockets and secure a future for my residents?
Just before the Chancellor responds, to support me to get more members in, can the questions please be short? Chancellor.
I thank my honourable friend for that question. I know in her Portsmouth constituency you'll be benefiting from Pride in Place funding to invest in those places that were forgotten by the previous government. Will benefit directly from the uplift in defence spending, not just in ensuring our country's security, but good jobs, paying decent wages in Portsmouth. And our reforms to the Green Book means that coastal communities will get their fair share and will get an opportunity to bid for funding to help grow their economy through the £120 billion we're putting in for capital investment.
Madam Deputy Speaker, if lifting the two-child benefit cap is such a moral imperative of this Labour government, could the Chancellor advise the House why it was that only 20 months ago a commitment to do so was entirely absent from the Labour Party manifesto, and why it was that 19 days after that election they withdrew the whip from 7 Labour MPs for the apparent crime of voting for that moral imperative?
Chancellor.
I've always been clear that any policies that this government will announce will always be fully costed and fully funded. And it wasn't until the budget last year that I was able to guarantee that. We set out how that would be funded through the gambling tax and also cracking down on tax avoidance and tax evasion. But perhaps the honourable gentleman could advise why he wants 500,000 children to return straight into poverty.
Sarah Coombs.
We've heard a lot about young people today, but in my constituency of West Bromwich, the thing young people really want is the chance to own their own home. But for years, they've been locked out of that because of sky-high mortgage rates, thanks to the policies of the party opposite. I welcome the 6 interest rate cuts that have been overseen under this government. And can the Chancellor elaborate on what more we are doing to help young people in West Brom get on the housing ladder and bring down the costs of borrowing?
I know that families and young people in West Bromwich and across the country want to get on the housing ladder. That's why we've committed to build 1.5 million new homes in this Parliament. It's why we have returned stability to the economy, allowing the Bank of England to cut interest rates 6 times. And it's also why in my Mansion House speeches I've announced regulatory reforms to make it easier for banks and, crucially, building societies to lend more to first-time buyers, and they are doing just that.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Chancellor must be concerned that none of the good news she shared with us today is being felt by people in the real world. Inflation is down, but she will know that that doesn't suddenly make things more affordable. And interest rates are down, but she will know that millions this year, when their fixed rate terms expire, will lock into higher rate deals. Combine this good news with higher taxes, higher unemployment and a slowdown in growth, and it's no wonder that people still feel squeezed this year as they did last year. So my question to the Chancellor is this: if her plan is working, when will people actually feel the benefit?
Chancellor.
Well, every month since I've been Chancellor of the Exchequer, wages have risen faster than inflation. We've increased the national minimum wage and the national living wage to put more money in the pockets of the poorest people. And the interest rate cuts mean that compared to when I became Chancellor, a typical family getting a fixed rate mortgage will be paying £1,300 less a year. And the OBR confirmed today that GDP per capita will rise by 5.6% during the course of this Parliament. I recognise, though, that the legacy of the previous Conservative government still runs deep, and it will take a while for people to feel the impact of these policies. But I'm confident this will be the year that things start to turn around.
Elsie Blundell. Serena Brackenridge.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Does the Chancellor agree that restoring confidence and hope for families in Wolverhampton and Willinghall is achieved by a stable economy, with borrowing falling, debt interest falling and inflation falling faster than expected, moving away from the chaos of spiralling mortgage rates to the stability of falling rates?
Chancellor.
Well, I was very pleased to spend some time in my honourable friend's constituency recently, where we met a family who are now able to get on the housing ladder because of those reduction in interest rates. And so instead of living with mum and dad, that couple and their young child are now able to get a home of their own. That's only possible because of the stability that we've returned to the economy, giving the Bank of England space to cut interest rates 6 times since I became Chancellor.
Good.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Chancellor claimed to be cutting debt, but she will know that the OBR Economic and Fiscal Outlook at paragraph 5.9 says public sector net borrowing is forecast to increase public sector net debt in each year by an average of £92 billion. So, to avoid misleading the House, will she correct the record?
Chancellor.
The OBR have revised down the level of debt in every year of the forecast.
Sue Blundell, are we ready?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I would like to thank the Chancellor for her statement and the decisions that she has taken to ensure the stability of our public finances so that we can improve our public services. As the Chancellor will know, the number of individuals within the probation system is at an all-time high, with violent reoffending perpetuating the cycle of crime and leaving the public at risk. What steps will be taken by the Treasury to drive down the number of staffing vacancies within the probation service, ensuring that those within it are working relentlessly in reducing reoffending and ensuring the safety of the communities that we represent?
As Chancellor, my responsibility is to make sure that in the spending review we had fair settlements for every department, including a big uplift in the settlement for the Ministry of Justice, so that we can invest in probation staff, in prison officers and indeed in prisons, which were full to bursting point when we came into government because of the legacy of the previous government.
Kirsty Blackman.
It's not just an uncertain period for North Sea workers, it is a crisis, and it has been a crisis for years. Investment has completely disappeared, jobs are being hemorrhaged, and now it's being made even more clear why we need a homegrown energy supply, why we cannot rely on importing from overseas. Will the Chancellor, as she meets North Sea leaders tomorrow, listen to their calls on the EPL, give confidence in the future of the industry, and ensure that my constituency and those across the UK don't continue to hemorrhage these jobs?
I thank the Honourable Lady for that question, and I'm meeting the North Sea oil and gas sector tomorrow because of the huge volatility that we are seeing in oil and gas prices at the moment. Since the budget, the OBR forecasts show a sharp fall in oil and gas prices, but of course we've seen some of that reversed in the last few days. That, if it continues, will put pressure on the bills that all of our constituents pay, and it is important that we get the right balance between taxing profits and also making sure that our constituents can pay to fill up their car and also pay their gas and electricity bills.
Geldard.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and I warmly welcome that the UK will now, thanks to these Labour choices, spend £3 billion less per year on debt interest by 2030. My constituents in South East Cornwall need to feel this in their daily lives, so will the Chancellor further outline how this unlocks the ability to tackle living standards rather than spending to service debt, and how this might support local infrastructure?
We're currently spending £100 billion a year on interest payments on government debt. That's not reducing the government debt, it is just the interest on government debt, and that's 1 in every £10 of what government spends. I think there's better ways to spend that money, which is why I'm determined both to start bringing down the debt, but also, crucially, to reduce the interest payment on that debt. And the OBR confirmed today that next year we're going to spend £4 billion less on interest on government debt because of the decisions we've made to return stability and give confidence to investors.
Andrew Morrison.
The statement began really well by outlining the desperate international situation and by praising our armed forces. But does the Chancellor agree that her remarks would have been all the more credible if she had announced that the dither and delay that has plagued defence spending over the past 18 months was brought to an end, and that she had set a date for the publication of the much-delayed defence investment plan?
I think it's a little bit rich for the Conservatives to talk about dither and delay when it comes to defence spending. They had 14 years and defence spending fell as a share of GDP. We are increasing it, the biggest uplift in defence spending since the end of the Cold War, and that is the right decision in light of the challenges it faced. But frankly, if the Conservative government had made those choices sooner, we might not be in such a position today.
John Grady.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the Chancellor's commitment to reducing government debt and the 95,000 children in Scotland being lifted out of poverty, and the revival of Glasgow's military shipyards, where we will build Labour boats, unlike S&P boats, which will work and have real windows. But would the Chancellor of the Exchequer agree with me that despite over £11 billion extra for the Scottish Government, it is an absolute disgrace for NHS waiting lists in Scotland are at a record level and standards in schools are falling?
I thank my honourable friend for that question. 95,000 children in Scotland will be lifted out of poverty, and today we've been able to announce a further uplift in the budget available for the Scottish Government. I think we can only hope that it's a Labour government, not an SNP one, that has the chance to spend that money. Otherwise, I fear more increases in NHS waiting lists, worse results for kids at schools, because that is the SNP legacy.
Lockhart.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Chancellor calls this the right plan, but for who? For farmers being taxed to death, waspy women who are still waiting for justice, for small businesses and hospitality firms barely surviving, for hard-working childminders who are set to lose their 10% tax allowance. With energy price rising excessively because of the escalating conflict involving Iran, families and businesses are already worrying about heating their home or filling their cars. They have heard absolutely no hope, nothing today. What they see is soaring public spend on housing and support for asylum seekers, unachievable and expensive net zero spend, while their own bills are rising. When will this government put hard-working British families first?
Well, it was a Northern Ireland Executive who came to us asking for additional money this year to fund their priorities, which we have given, and also in today's settlement an extra £380 million in day-to-day spending and £10 million in capital spending for the Northern Ireland Government to invest. If the Honourable Lady doesn't want that money, I'm sure other parts of the country would.
Catherine Atkinson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Derby will be the home of Great British Railways, which, with rail continuing its journey back into public ownership, will be focused on serving passengers rather than profit. Under the previous government, rail fares rose by 60% between 2010 and 2024, and now, with Labour, they are frozen. Does the Chancellor agree with me that bold measures like this to tackle travel costs will help bring down the cost of living?
I was really pleased in the budget last year to announce the plan for Derby alongside my honourable friend and her neighbouring MP in Derby, as well as the Mayor of the East Midlands. Derby will benefit from hosting Great British Rail in the way that we will all benefit from better train services under Great British Rail, and Rolls-Royce will benefit from higher defence spending and higher energy spending, including on small modular reactors, bringing more good jobs, paying decent wages to Derby.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Blairite policies told 50% of my generation to go to university. And looking back at the conversations, rarely did anyone ever talk about who would pay for these students to go to university, and then how the jobs market would then take on this amount of graduates. Now, it's clear that the student finance system doesn't work at the moment. And the goalposts keep shifting with government policies. I think there is a cross-party view that something does need to be done about this. So does the Chancellor view this as a serious issue, and what does she plan to do about it?
The view of the electorate just 18 months ago was that it was time to get rid of the Conservatives because of the broken system that they had left, whether it was student finances, the NHS, our prisons, our schools that were crumbling, and as a result, he's sitting on those benches, and I expect it will be for many years to come.
Finger.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that we saw from the Shadow Chancellor's performance that the number of times that a politician points their finger is often inversely proportional to the number of valid points they make? And the valid points that really matter to my constituents in Rugby and the surrounding villages are that there have been 6 interest rate cuts under her chancellorship, inflation is coming down, we have the highest growth of European nations in the G7, and far too much more to mention here, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Chancellor.
It was a real pleasure after the budget last year to join my honourable friend at a community centre in Rugby, where I was able to talk to his constituents about the benefits of the £150 cut in energy bills. But the conversation I remember most of all in my honourable friend's constituency was with a woman who had lost her husband just 6 months before. She had 4 children and would benefit because of the changes that we had made by getting rid of the 2-child limit. That's a conversation I won't forget, and it's the difference that we are making as a party in government.
Ian Amos.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Monkton Elm Garden Centre, with its 400 cover restaurant employing 120 staff, have been hit by a £70,000 increase in their business rates this year as part of a £178,000 cost put on by the last budget. What they would like to know from the Chancellor is if the government won't accept the 5% cut in VAT that Liberal Democrats would fund from a tax on bank levies, by the way, not from cutting services, would the Chancellor nonetheless extend the 15% discount to pubs on their business rates to restaurants and give our local businesses the support they need and give everyone the boost they want to see in our economy?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As the Honourable Gentleman knows, we are currently conducting a review of how the Valuation Office calculates business rates, including for our hospitality sector. But the last time the Liberal Democrats were in office and they had a choice over VAT policy, they increased it from 17.5% to 20%. So I'm not really sure why the public should believe that this time there's somehow going to be different.
Graham Downey.
Deputy Speaker, and can I thank the Chancellor in her statement for acknowledging the incredible contribution of the workforce at Rosyth in the rollout of the Type 31 frigate just last week. And I also thank the Chancellor for the ongoing investment in energy infrastructure, particularly as we see increasing challenges in the Middle East coming towards energy bills. Can I ask her, as she has done up to now, to make sure that we keep an eye on that situation with energy bills and that we're making sure we're investing wherever possible for our future energy security, but also to help people in the short term where necessary?
It was a real honour for me to be able to visit my honourable friend's constituency and see the Type 31 frigates being built there. This government is investing in defence and also investing in the skills of our young people so that they can get the jobs in these expanding sectors, unlike the SNP government in Scotland, who aren't investing in our young people. And as a result, too many defence companies are having to bring in labour from abroad because of the SNP's dislike of defence spending.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. For all the Chancellor's words about forecasts, reality bites when the real unemployment figures are examined. 5.2% today, the highest point since the pandemic, and youth unemployment at a considerable high. So instead of relying on forecasts that are never, ever right, how many more people need to lose their job and how many more young people need to go without one before the Chancellor accepts it's her policies that aren't working?
Well, the previous government presided over a 113,000 increase in young people not in education, employment or training, and the number of youth apprenticeships was cut by 40%. So why does the honourable gentleman think that unemployment amongst young people is a challenge? Because of the decisions that the previous government made. That is why we are putting over £800 million into a youth guarantee. It's why we're putting more money into further education that his government failed to do, and it's why we're expanding the number of youth apprenticeships. We recognise there's a challenge. The difference between our party and his party is that we're doing something about it, and they never did.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Chancellor for her statement and welcome the OBR forecast that unemployment will reduce to 4.1% by the end of the Parliament. No doubt driven by excellent policies like the youth guarantee and the apprenticeship reforms. The NEET rate does remain stubbornly high, though, in the UK. So may I urge her to target any additional headroom that may be available to help more young people into work and training? Investing in young people is good for them, it's good for society, and it's also good for the UK's finances. It's also the best way to reduce our welfare bill in the long term.
Well, this government is investing in young people, whether it is ending the two-child limit, investing in further education that was neglected by the previous government, increasing the number of young people who can go on to study apprenticeships, or indeed the youth guarantee worth more than £800 million. But as I said in my statement today, we do want to do more to tackle the legacy that was we inherited from the previous Conservative government to ensure that more young people get the opportunity of work, training or a college place.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Given what's happening in the Middle East at the moment, there's a concern that petrol and diesel prices will spiral up. If that happens, so too will taxation revenue on fuel. Can she commit today to keep taxation revenue at its current level, thereby reducing tax on fuel to help ease any future cost of pressure?
I think you can see from the policies that we've introduced over the last year that we're determined to address the cost of living challenges that we inherited from the party opposite, whether it is freezing rail fares, freezing prescription charges, extending the 5p cut in fuel duty until September this year, or indeed introducing Fuel Finder so that we can have better competition in amongst forecourts to bring down petrol and diesel prices. But of course, as I said in my statement, we're carefully monitoring the impact of what is happening in Iran and the Middle East, and we'll do everything in our power to ensure that working people do not pay the price for that conflict.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Now, we know that the volatility of oil and gas prices have driven the high cost of living over the last decade, and we also know that renewables cut the wholesale costs of electricity because it reduces the amount of time electricity prices are driven by gas. So does the Chancellor agree with me, given the inevitable impact of the events in the Middle East, that our drive for clean energy is the right thing to do both for bills and for the economic stability, and that the people who are advocating continual reliance on oil and gas and not investing in clean energy are actually committed to higher bills and committed to our continued reliance on foreign instability?
Chancellor.
Oil and gas are going to play an important part of our energy system for many years to come, including oil and gas that come from the North Sea. But we do need to improve our energy security. That was the lesson from Ukraine that this government are addressing by investing in small modular reactors at Sizewell C, but also in wind farms and solar farms, because we have got to wean ourselves off foreign oil and gas and prices that are dictated by international markets. That's why we are investing in clean energy, and what we're seeing unfold in Iran and the Middle East at the moment shows how necessary those policies are.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. A large economy of my constituency of Stratford-on-Avon depends on hospitality, tourism and our independent high streets. Pubs, cafes, arts venues, restaurants, hotels are telling me that they are being squeezed from every direction: higher employer national insurance, rising energy bills and uncertainty over business rates relief. Does the Chancellor understand the cumulative damage this is doing to communities like mine, and will she commit today to proper business rates reform and targeted support for hospitality and leisure?
The best thing we can do to support our high streets and small businesses is ensure that more people have more of their money in their pockets to spend not on the essentials but the things that they want to do. That's why we're taking £150 off people's energy bills. It's why we're frozen prescription charges and also freezing rail fares as well, so that people have got more money to spend on what they want to do rather than just on the essentials, including in local shops in her constituency.
Bagashankar.
Deputy Speaker, I thank my right honourable friend the Chancellor for her statement. Whether it's delivering a record-breaking fair funding settlement for our council or backing Team Derby, this government is definitely turning the page on years of brutal Tory austerity. However, many in our city still feel left out and left behind because of the depth of those austerity cuts. Will the Chancellor work and give every neighbourhood the tools they need so every place is a place decent to live in?
I thank my honourable friend for that question. And I think it gets to the heart of the issue that we have done an awful lot in the last year and a half to bring down interest rates, to ensure people have got more of their own money in their pockets, and there's more of that to come, with the two-child limit going from April, the £150 off energy bills from April, the changes to rail fares that happened last weekend. But this is all against a backdrop of 14 years of people being made worse off by the choices of the party opposite. I don't expect people to feel all the benefits of the change we've made straight away, but the changes coming in the next few months, I do believe, will start to be felt in the pockets of people in Derby and across the country.
The government wants growth. We all want growth. But surely the Chancellor can see that by extending the marine greenhouse gas emission regulations to the ferries, which are the economic lifeline to Northern Ireland, in circumstances where there aren't any zero emission alternatives. Surely she can see that that carbon tax is going to add hugely to consumer costs of my constituents, and is going to disincentivise growth. So will she look again at that imposition, particularly in circumstances where the Scottish Islands, who equally depend on the ferries, have been given an exemption?
I thank the honourable gentleman for that question. It is important that we wean ourselves off oil and gas prices that are set on international markets, but I absolutely accept the point he's making. I'm very happy to suggest that the relevant minister meets with the honourable gentleman.
David Burton-Sampson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The impact of the Liz Truss budget in September 2022 affected many homeowners, with mortgage rates shooting up and the average 2-year fixed exceeding 6%. And working in the mortgage industry, I saw the impact this had on working people's finances. Whilst it's still being felt, does she agree with me that it's because of the actions of this Labour government in restoring economic stability that we've seen 6 interest rate cuts since the general election, a welcome relief for many, unlike the parties opposite who have no credible plan and would return this country to the devastating days of Liz Truss?
I thank my honourable friend for that question, and he speaks with authority about mortgage costs, given the jobs that he did before he became a Member of Parliament in Southend. And it is true that since the general election, somebody getting a fixed-rate mortgage will be paying £1,300 less a year than they were when we came into office. That means they have more money to spend on their high streets, on their families, on the things that matter, not just paying for the essentials, the price of which all went up under the Conservatives.
Chris Curtis.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Economic policies introduced by the previous government piled more and more pressure onto my generation, adding to intergenerational unfairness. And nowhere is that more clear than with Plan 2 student loans. To declare my interest, I still owe more than £40,000. Now, the policy proposed by the party opposite won't do anything to alleviate cost of living pressures on young people now. Given the better economic outlook we've seen today, will the Chancellor meet with me and other MPs who are concerned about the Plan 2 student loan system to talk about how we can make the system fairer and more sustainable into the future?
I thank my honourable friend for that question. To help the generation that he speaks about, we've introduced the Renters' Rights Bill, and we're also bringing down interest rates and inflation, which makes it easier to get on the housing ladder, but also, of course, crucially, reduces the interest rates on both Plan 2 student loans and other student loans which were frozen for 10 years, the threshold, under the previous government.
Alex Borras-Curtis. Andrew, I'm so sorry. I was staring at you and thinking of them. Go for it.
Accepted, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, on days like this, I'm particularly grateful that NHS waiting lists are falling, because although it seems a long time ago, I was very concerned watching the Shadow Chancellor about his blood pressure. And he's no longer in his place, but I hope he has gone to get his blood pressure checked. And I think it's important that we take a breath and actually look at what the economy is doing. Borrowing is down, inflation is down, and headroom is up. So can I ask the Chancellor to say that I particularly welcome the news from the OBR today that investment in housing as part of the economy is up? And does she agree with me that we need to continue to invest in housing to make sure that people's aspirations to buy their own home are supported by this government?
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and thank you to my honourable friend for that question. He was worried about the Shadow Chancellor's blood pressure. Frankly, I was worried about his future employment prospects. NHS waiting lists are falling because of the money that we have put in, but he makes the point about overall investment in the economy as well, and investment in the UK. After lagging behind pretty much every other advanced country in the world, we've had the fastest investment growth in the G7 since the general election here in the UK.
Final question, the one we've been waiting for, Christmas.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Chancellor for her statement about 2 hours ago.
Fortunately, Madam Deputy Speaker, my Shakespeare quote for the day is that brevity is the soul of wit, so I'll be very, very quick. We know under the last government that national debt soared and that £1 in every £10 is spent servicing that debt. What difference can we make to public services in Harlow if we can spend less on debt repayment and more on those services?
Well, it's not Shakespeare, but I always say save the best till last. So I would just say to my honourable friend for Harlow, if we can spend less money on paying the interest of debt, we've got more money to spend on our NHS, on our defence and on keeping taxes down. And that is only possible if you return stability to the economy. And what the forecast from the OBR show today is that we have the right plan. Inflation and interest rates coming down, government borrowing costs, government borrowing and government debt on a downward path. That compares to the previous government that lost control of the public finances and, as a result, lost control of family finances. In 18 months, we've begun to turn that around. Is there more to do? Absolutely. But we have started on that course. And if we stick to the plan, the prize at the end is huge.
That is the end of the spring forecast. I'll allow the Chancellor on the front bench a moment to shuffle over.
I've just got to rush and do so. I'll be right back.